The following is a CNN special report.
The present system is dangerous, it's outdated, it's archaic, it's one that needs to be revised.
Born hundreds of years ago.
It really was a Frankenstein's monster of sorts.
Challenged and criticized, but fiercely resilient until now.
There are some issues. For better or worse, I tried a Hail Mary.
He said, I think we can do something about this.
I decided maybe someone should take a stand.
We were the bad news bears of the political world.
Going rogue meant taking risks.
Did you think you were committing a crime?
No.
We were fined $1,000.
And the backlash was brutal.
Plenty of death threats and hate.
A desperate political play to try to keep one man from becoming president.
I think it scared people because no one's used the Electoral College this way.
That you thought you had the power to change history.
I thought we had the power to prevent a demagogue from taking office.
Election 2020.
On the path to defeating Donald Trump.
Could it happen again?
America should not take lectures on racial justice from Joe Biden.
We are going to be in uncharted territory. This is a Pandora's box.
Tonight, a CNN special report. Count on controversy inside the Electoral College.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next President of the United States.
Election year 2016.
Lying, crooked Hillary.
An unqualified loose cannon.
It was a very divisive election. You had two candidates that many people considered to be toxic.
The only thing she's got going is the woman's card.
Here's the sad truth. There is no other Donald Trump. This is it.
But behind the headlines, something was happening. America was in for a historic surprise.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. It is Election Day in America.
Mr. Trump, what are you hearing about early returns so far from your team? Very good. Very good?
Everything's very good.
I was a little stressed out in the morning.
Michael Baca was more stressed than most. His vote in his election was still a month away.
I think most people in this country didn't think that Donald Trump was going to win. And so I fully expected Hillary Clinton to win the presidency and to cast the ballot for Hillary Clinton.
Baca was one of 538 electors chosen months before Election Day.
Each elector must vote separately for the president and for vice president.
They would make up the Electoral College to cast the official votes for president and vice president in December, a month after the general election. And as a Democratic elector from Colorado, everyone assumed Baca would cast his vote for the candidate who won the popular vote in Colorado, Hillary Clinton.
CNN can now project that the state of Colorado will go to Hillary Clinton with its 9 electoral votes.
As America watched the map on election night, more states, some unexpected states, turned red.
Let's take a look at the Electoral College map right now. You see Donald Trump has taken the lead.
The magic of election night is you study the demographics, you start seeing what's happening in Pennsylvania. And then it's also happening in Michigan.
Lock her up! Lock her up!
And then it's also happening in Wisconsin.
Vote, baby, vote!
Very similar places where people do the same things. They work the same jobs. They have the same median income. The community is, overwhelmingly white, working class.
Are we rewriting America's Electoral College map tonight?
Trump winning Ohio, Florida, and North Carolina.
I was at the watch parties and it came clear that night that Donald Trump was going to win the Electoral College.
He won. And he reset the map. He blew it up.
It's one thing to win a map, but another to win the most votes. Trump had a clear win in the Electoral College, but a significant deficit in actual ballots, trailing Hillary Clinton by nearly 3 million votes, making it only the 5th time in U.S. history a president has lost the popular vote and still won the presidency. The very system he derided just 4 years earlier as a disaster for a democracy, a total sham and a travesty.
I, Donald John Trump.
That system paved his way to the White House.
My president, not my president!
A recipe for rancor, resentment, and confusion.
Stop the Trump!
Across the country, you have protests, as some people are still furious with the result of the election.
Clearly, there's chaos sometimes. People are angry. It's a huge problem that Americans don't understand the presidential election system, mostly because where there's controversy, your first instinct is to blame the system, to blame the Electoral College.
This wasn't the first time.
It appeared Bush had sealed the deal in Florida.
Not even the first time this century.
But now, with only hundreds of votes separating the candidates, a recount is expected.
In 2000, in one of the closest presidential contests that we've ever had, George W. Bush had 271 Electoral College votes. Remember, you need 270 to win.
Thank you, Miami!
Al Gore won the popular vote in that election by about 500,000 votes.
2.9 million voters in Florida voted for Al Gore. 2.9 million voters voted for the Democratic candidate. What did those votes end up mattering in the presidential election overall?
0. He got 0 electoral votes from Florida.
And that's because of the Electoral College and its winner-take-all system.
George Walker Bush has won Florida's 25 electoral votes.
There's this great American notion of one person, one vote. How does the Electoral College system as it stands now align with that?
Well, given winner take all, it's a grotesque distortion of one person, one vote.
We have winner take all in most all states, which means that if you win a state by one vote, you get all of the Electoral College votes in that state, which could lead to some pretty strong disproportionate outcomes.
Our system, the winner-take-all, which encourages the two-party system, it can be frustrating.
Gore must concede! Gore must concede!
It was a close election in Florida.
Gore must concede!
And I think the wonderful thing about the Electoral College is that we were able to isolate our election problems to Florida that year. We argued over hanging chads in a few counties in Florida. Imagine if we had been forced to conduct a national recount because of a close election. That would be a nightmare.
There are others who think the whole system is a nightmare.
So in 2016, 95% of candidate appearances and 99% of campaign spending happened in just 14 states, the so-called swing states. But the rest of the country, the majority of the country, states like New York, Texas, Oklahoma, Utah, Montana, Kentucky, those states which are not swing states, they don't matter to the presidential candidate.
And for some, that's a problem, because those 14 states don't always represent 50.
This is a system that systematically says to people, you don't matter if you don't come from a swing state. And even if you come from a swing state, like Florida, if you don't happen to be in the majority, we're going to count your votes for the purpose of just throwing them away.
This comes back to a pretty important question about legitimacy. The fact that somebody can be elected as the President of the United States without winning the popular vote is certainly unsettling to many, confusing to many.
Keep America great.
Even more unsettling to some, it could happen again in even bigger fashion. Donald Trump trailed by almost 3 million votes in 2016. In 2020, he could conceivably trail by even more and still emerge victorious.
I think most people don't think about the Electoral College until something like this happens. You got a ton more votes, and the other guy gets to be President of the United States. The paper says that's the rules, whether you like them or not.
Michael Baca was ready to rewrite the rule book.
When it became clear that she lost the Electoral College vote, I realized that there's still one more opportunity to prevent Donald Trump. It's just not going to be with Secretary Clinton as president. And so, for better or worse, I tried a Hail Mary.
Coming up, would his plan work?
You thought you had the power to change history.
The Electoral College are a bunch of officials who do the voting for us. So in case we elect the wrong person, they can fix that shit.
Whoa, hold up. Who the hell are these people?
Well, no one knows for sure, but whoever they is, they the folks who actually do the real voting after we do our pretend vote. Yeah!
Comedians Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele were joking. Sort of.
So this November, we should, yeah, dunk the vote!
It might not have been exactly what the framers of the Constitution had in mind some 200 years ago, but it's not far off.
The founders understood human nature. They understood that everybody's fallible. The states are fallible. The national government's fallible. Elected officials are fallible. Everybody can be corrupted. And they knew that they needed a system of checks and balances to protect liberty against the imperfections of human nature.
So how would they address all these concerns? How would we elect our presidents?
So help me God. I congratulate you, sir.
They bounced around a bunch of ideas. Maybe one house of Congress selecting or both houses sitting together selecting.
They thought about state legislatures or governors selecting the president.
They thought about the idea of a direct popular vote.
The small states were very afraid of a national popular vote. They would not have agreed to it. They knew they would be outvoted by the large states time and time again.
It was a hard problem to solve.
They settled on using the representation out of the legislature.
Members of Electoral College.
And then electors to select the President of the United States. And that ended up being the Electoral College. It really was a Frankenstein's monster of sorts.
So, folks like Alexander Hamilton came up with a system that gives the power to the states to choose the president. Think of it as 51 separate elections. But this is where it gets tricky, because when you and I cast our ballots on Election Day, we're not really voting for president. We're actually choosing a slate of electors to vote on our behalf. These electors make up the Electoral College, and when they get together in December, it's their votes that officially and technically choose the president. Of course, we've all mostly come to assume that they'll vote the way we tell them to. You getting all this down? I know it's a lot, so we thought we'd ask some friends of ours to help you understand.
Who are the electors? They're the ones who elect, the ones that you vote for, who will vote in your stead. You signal your choice, you give them your trust, but it's up to them and not up to us. We're only the voters, they are the electors. In Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the framers spelled out how the chief executive is chosen. They laid out the rules for elections. They wanted a system that would be free from corruption. The winner would be chosen by an unaligned delegation without partisan affiliation. They're called the electors because they elect. They're like our protectors, adding one extra step. You signal your choice, you give them your trust, but it's up to them and not up to us. We're only the voters, they are the electors. Every state gets a number of electors that's exactly the same as the number of senators and representatives they claim, plus 3 added on for DC. They are the electors of 538. They are the electors, giving smaller states extra weight. You signal your choice, you give them your trust, but it's up to them and not up to us. We're only the voters, they are the electors.
When you set it to music, it all seems so simple. And maybe it was in 1787.
I am your voice.
But when you consider they never really factored in political parties, they never really imagined actual campaigns, they never even required states to hold actual elections for president, let's just say this is not your father's Electoral College. Certainly not your founding fathers' Electoral College.
The Electoral College that we look at today really is nothing like that of which the framers put together. The winner-take-all that most states use, the rise of political parties, and the obedience of faithful electors really changed that body tremendously.
What is a faithful elector, you ask?
Please bring forth the certificates of vote.
Well, let's explain by telling you what or who it isn't.
James Madison said, I think it's a great thing that these electors can vote in accordance with what their constituents want. That's good. We like that. But he also said, I find it valuable that they have the ability to step in if there's an emergency and to act with common sense. There was a really big gap between Election Day and the meetings of the electors, and lots of things can happen.
Democratic elector Michael Baca.
Did you have a plan for what you would do if Trump won?
We was definitely thinking about it.
Baca knew there wasn't a lot of wiggle room as a Colorado elector.
What does the state of Colorado expect with its electors?
Colorado expected me to vote for the Democratic nominee. The person who won the popular vote in Colorado. It was merely a suggestion on what electors can do. It wasn't set in stone.
But in their mind, it's a sealed deal.
But it's an unconstitutional law.
Under Colorado state law, like most other states, electors are bound to support the candidate they're identified with on the ballot. So in Colorado, we don't list electors on the ballot. We list the major parties and their candidates. And it is both understood and expected, and it's required by Colorado law that electors follow the pledge and they vote for the person they're identified with.
There are some issues.
Coming up, Baca wasn't alone. Other electors in other states shared the same dilemma.
It's so often seen the elector position be ignored and seen only as a prize at the end of a career. And I decided maybe someone should take a stand and truly understand the Electoral College.
It's too small, can't build a wall. It's too small, can't build a wall. Donald Trump, go away. Racist, sexist, anti-gay. Hey, hey, whoa, whoa. Donald Trump has got to go.
A lot of people thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Yeah. Were you one of them?
Yeah. And then when it turned into this decisive victory, I realized that we had to do something in the Electoral College.
In 2016, Colorado resident Michael Baca was one of 538 electors that would cast the official vote for president 1 month after the general election.
It was literally overnight on election night when you thought, hey, wait a second here.
3:43 in the morning, I realized that, hey, we needed electors willing to not vote for Donald Trump.
You thought you had the power to change history.
I thought we had the power to prevent a demagogue from taking office, yes.
But if Baca was going to keep Trump out of office, he would need help.
Me and another elector out of Washington, we began talking.
That night?
Yeah.
I had a phone call with an elector from Colorado named Michael Baca. We discussed the situation with Donald Trump winning the general election.
Baca connected with Democratic electors Brett Shafalo in Washington State and Polly Baca in Colorado. Polly and Michael have the same last name, but they are not related.
When Michael approached me to help him, he said, I think we can do something about this. And for me, of course, I was so disturbed by the outcome, of that election.
Shafalo was also on board with Michael's idea.
The internet was exploding, and we were trying to say, hey, there's actual electors here. Alexander Hamilton wrote one of the Federalist Papers, and in there, he states that electors shall stop any candidate who is unqualified, who is a demagogue, or is controlled by foreign powers.
So Brett, Polly, and Michael started a campaign to convince fellow electors to change their votes.
We decided that the only choice to stop Donald Trump, vote for a different Republican candidate and convince 37 Republican electors to do the same.
Initially, we had called it the moral electors. We were trying to get electors to vote their conscience and say, hey, these state laws, they're not constitutional.
Moral electors soon became the Hamilton electors.
Why are they called Hamilton electors?
In the spirit of Alexander Hamilton, who explicitly describes the Electoral College as comprised of a body of men who would exercise a discretion to select a president who, in their judgment, fit the best interests of the nation.
You voted for Hillary Clinton in the election.
Yes, yes.
But after election night, who did you propose the electors vote for?
Governor Kasich from Ohio.
Did you want him to become president?
No, but when faced with Donald Trump as the option,
why not push more Republicans to vote for Hillary?
You weren't going to find Republican electors to not vote for the Republican and give control to a Democrat. You're going to have to give control to a Republican.
You were looking for somebody you might be able to convince some Republican electors to vote for.
Yeah.
When it came down to it, who voted for who didn't really matter. 37 Republicans could vote for a different person each, and the plan still would have been the same.
They were trying to find some kind of consensus candidate that could work across the aisle. So they wanted to deny Donald Trump a majority of Electoral College votes, kick it to the House of Representatives, and then have someone like John Kasich or Colin Powell become President of the United States as this consensus choice in the House of Representatives.
They needed at least 37 Republican electors, and they had 6 weeks until the Electoral College would meet on December 19th.
Talk to me about the effort to get other electors on board. What did that look like?
Messy. That was complicated. We were the bad news bears of the political world.
Unfortunately, one of the things that happened immediately after the general election is people started flooding their phone numbers, flooding their email boxes, flooding their actual mailboxes with cries to stop Donald Trump.
And we'd start calling Republicans in states where we knew there were Republican electors who were not pleased.
It wasn't until I had a phone call with Chris Suprin in Texas. He was the first Republican to come on board.
The Electoral College is here to do exactly what I think I'm doing, which is standing up and saying no.
We got him to do an op-ed in the New York Times. We were hoping that once the first Republican came on board, others would follow.
That op-ed created momentum.
Groups opposed to Donald Trump have been trying to convince GOP electors not to vote for the president-elect.
This campaign that you were on started getting some media attention.
That was definitely, weird at first.
Weird, but not alone.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you.
A groundswell of support with one resounding message.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent an unfit candidate from becoming president.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
By voting your conscience, you and other brave Republican electors can give the House of Representatives the option to select a qualified candidate for the presidency.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
But sometimes standing with you still means looking behind you.
You got a lot of hate, too.
There's some death threats.
What's that like?
Unless you have a gun to my head or a knife to my throat, I don't really fear too much. It was definitely concerning enough that I had to contact the FBI.
Do you think it intimidated anyone else?
100%. I think people were definitely afraid.
Emails, Twitter messages, Facebook messages, and unfortunately some of those messages that came through were death threats.
Republican electors Michael Benarian and Chris Suprin said the threats forced them to take notice.
There are people who have said, hey, we need to hang him by a tree. We need to come to his house.
I had people saying they're going to put a bullet in the back of my mouth, people sending me pictures of a noose, saying that they'd get me if I don't do the right thing.
Plenty of electors of all stripes got death threats and hate. And it's one of the things that made our jobs a lot harder.
These are things that none of these people signed up for.
This is a book.
Author Robert Alexander has been surveying electors for more than 20 years. He's known what the rest of us are just finding out.
I had respondents from our survey writing back and saying, I will never serve as an elector again. I received death threats. I received email viruses. People stopped me on the street.
Despite the threats, the faithless electors had faith in what they were doing.
It scared people because no one's used the Electoral College this way. And so they're like, can we even do this? Is this even right? But I think sometimes you just gotta stand up and be willing to fight for your convictions.
Coming up.
Did you ever think it was gonna work?
I thought it was definitely gonna work.
December 19th, 2016.
There's a giant rally outside of the state capitol in Denver.
In every state and Washington, D.C., electors like Michael Baca in Colorado met to cast the official votes for President of the United States.
I went and talked to the crowd. I gave them updates on, hey, this is what's going on in Maine. This is what's going on as the East Coast voted, because I was also waiting those results to know, is this movement going to work?
That morning, I made some calls. I called around the country to find out if there was a possibility of getting Republicans to not vote for this man and vote for whomever else to prevent him from becoming president.
We actually believed we had upwards of 50 people who were seriously considering not voting for Donald Trump. And all we needed was 37.
Would the faithless electors keep Trump out of the White House?
It was clear that there was a number of electors who were considering it, and they were not going to act, however, unless it was clear there were going to be more than 37.
Were they afraid of partisan politics, or were they afraid of the Constitution?
Well, some of them were afraid of partisan politics, but many of them were afraid of the law. Because in many of these jurisdictions, the law expressly said they had to vote as they pledged.
In Colorado, the Attorney General's office knew something was happening.
That day, the electors showed up, and some of them were asking questions. What if they want to vote for somewhere else? They were told by the Secretary of State, you're not allowed to do that.
And as I made my calls, I realized that we didn't have the votes. We were shy maybe 10 votes.
Realizing their chances of stopping a Trump presidency were slim, Polly decided to cast her vote for Clinton.
I love Hillary Clinton. She was the person that I wanted to be president.
While their campaign was coming to an end, a more important battle was just beginning.
So now I will count ballots. We have received 8 votes for Hillary Clinton for president and 1 ballot which cannot be received.
Who'd you vote for?
Governor Kasich.
What were you thinking at the moment you wrote the name John Kasich?
Spell it correctly. I've never actually told anyone this, but I was going to vote for Evan McMullen, but I didn't want to misspell his last name. So I voted for Governor Kasich.
Evan McMullen is a former CIA official who ran as an independent during the 2016 presidential election. John Kasich, the former Republican governor of Ohio.
Our Secretary of State, Wayne Williams, said to Mr. Baca, if you won't cast a ballot as you're required to do under Colorado law, I'm going to have to remove you.
And then what happened?
I was removed as an elector, and I didn't know what was going to happen.
We will ask the electors to nominate a replacement elector so that a 9th vote can be cast. We need an elector who will cast a vote for the person who received the most votes for president in the state of Colorado.
When you become an elector, you know the deal. Your name's not on the ballot. You are there on an assignment to vote for the candidate who gets the most votes in Colorado. That's your role. It's ceremonial mostly, but it's a role. When people sign up for the role, they know what to expect.
Did you think you were committing a crime?
No. No.
Thank you, Michael! Thank you, Michael! Thank you, Michael!
What does Colorado state law say about electors voting their conscience?
So Colorado state law requires an elector to pledge to vote for the candidate of their party.
Further north, a slightly different battle was being waged by Brett Schifalo and 2 other electors.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
By the time I was driving down to Olympia, Washington, our state capital, in December, enough states had voted by that time. We knew our attempt to stop Trump had failed.
It's been a very long and interesting political cycle this year in Washington and across the country. So in 2016, when we convened the electors here in the Capitol, it was a very big day. We had a lot of people here, a lot of media here, and you could tell that there was a little bit of tension because there was a rumor that some of them were not going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I am the elector from the 4th Congressional District.
Levi Guerra, Esther Little Dove John, and myself stepped aside and we said, who are we going to vote for? And Levi brought up Colin Powell. We all agreed.
Okay, now I want you to read this right here, what the votes were.
All right, for the office of President of the United States, Colin Powell received 3 votes.
There was a level of, I think, disbelief turned into frustration that their candidate won the popular vote but wasn't going to be elected, and they were just trying kind of any last-minute move they could to have people change their votes to try to elect someone other than Donald Trump.
Unlike in Colorado, their votes did count, but there were consequences.
About a week later, we were fined $1,000.
It was the first time in U.S. history any elector had been fined for casting a different vote than their state's popular vote winner.
So it's a slightly different case here. Their vote wasn't taken away, but they were punished. So why is the law different there?
Well, in both cases, the question is, does the state have the power to control, through legal means, how someone votes?
The Electoral College votes.
Today, 32 states plus the District of Columbia have laws requiring electors to pledge their vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in their state. And if the electors go rogue, well, the punishment is a mixed bag. They can be replaced, fined, or their vote simply canceled.
The Constitution says nothing about how electors are supposed to vote.
In fact, the 12th Amendment only says the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, and not much else.
But it stops short of saying anything about requiring electors to vote a specific way.
Polly Baca was a Colorado state legislator for 12 years, and she says state laws requiring electors to pledge their vote are unconstitutional.
After Michael was removed, I was angry. You know, that was just not right. That was illegal. And so I talked to the other electors, and 3 of us decided that we would sue the state.
Polly, Michael, and Robert Nemenich filed a lawsuit against the state of Colorado for removing Michael as an elector. A federal court ruled against them, but they appealed and won.
The appeals court agreed with us that our position was the correct constitutional position. It was at that point that the other side then appealed to the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court agreed to hear the Colorado case and also Shafalo's case in Washington after a lower federal court upheld his $1,000 fine.
Did you yelp? Did you scream? It's a heck of a thing when a federal court says you win.
I yelped when the Supreme Court decided to take the case. That was a, whoo, oh my goodness. We got a little excited in the middle class, and they're like, what's going on? It's fun being able to share that moment with our kids, because how many government teachers have been in the Supreme Court while they're teaching? I hope it inspires them to be engaged citizens.
It's very clear in the Constitution that the popular vote is not what elects presidents.
2 faithless elector cases, 2 states, 2 different results. History was on the doorstep of our nation's highest court. Would their decision open the door for chaos come November? Coming up,
if the Supreme Court does rule and say, no, electors do not have to be obedient, they are free agents and they can do what they wish, that should send a bit of a chill down the spines of many Americans.
This is a Pandora's box, and we are going to be in uncharted territory.
the silence. The rage. Election year 2020.
A lot of unprecedented things that have occurred. We have no idea yet how the pandemic will play itself out. And certainly the issues that we have seen with race over the summer will likely spill over into the fall. If we're thinking about trying to eliminate chaos, chaos in many ways will be baked into the 2020 election.
So, funny story, I was leaving Colorado after I voted to go spend some time with my family. And I was driving through some small little town in New Mexico, and I stopped to get gas. And I see on the newspaper in there, it says, "No Hamilton electors here." And I'm like, I'm in this small little cowpoke town in the middle of nowhere, and here they are talking about the Electoral College.
Former Colorado elector Michael Baca did more than just pull into a gas station. When he and fellow elector Brett Shafalo started the Hamilton electors, they fueled an argument that had never been settled.
With the opportunity to get a question answered that should have gotten answered in the last 200 years. How do we actually elect our president? What are electors and what purpose do they serve?
Brett Shafalo voted for Republican Colin Powell. Michael Baca voted for Ohio Governor John Kasich. Their idea, to vote for a more moderate Republican instead of the state's popular vote winner, to prevent Donald Trump from winning the White House. Cefalo's vote counted, Baca's did not, and the plan didn't work. But their decision to vote faithlessly, well, that would linger amid controversy and court filings for 4 years.
Where this gets really interesting, really complicated, and really, to be frank, combustible, is what happens if a faithless elector were to shift the outcome of an election.
Yeah, that's right. 2000 election, where 2 electors switching would have flipped the result, I think begins a series of elections where we're going to see very close results going forward. So that makes this question much more important in the future.
They are playing a very dangerous game. The American people have absolutely come to expect when votes are cast on election day, the presidential election is decided. To undo that 220 years of history would defy expectations and constitutional tradition.
And that's why the Supreme Court added Baca and Cefalo to its docket.
The Supreme Court has never ruled on this. We are going to be in uncharted territory. This is a Pandora's box.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay.
We will hear argument first this morning in case 19-465, Chiafalo and others versus the state of Washington.
Listening to a Supreme Court case and hearing Justice Ginsburg say my last name was completely surreal.
What's that like all of a sudden to realize, hey, wait a second, the guys who wrote the Constitution, they wrote about me?
Well, they didn't write about me. They wrote about the role of the electors, and I think that's what that's important that the court is going to address here.
The question in these cases is straightforward. Do the states have the power to control through law how an elector may vote? They do not.
Larry Lessig was one of 4 attorneys arguing the Colorado and Washington cases about faithless electors. Historic and unprecedented arguments about bribery and chaos heard by the Supreme Court by phone.
Suppose an elector is bribed between the time of the popular vote and the time when the electors vote. Can the state remove that elector?
Your Honor, we believe that prior to the vote, the state's power is to assure that the person who shows up has not engaged in a criminal activity. Of course, the claim someone has been bribed is a charge. It needs to be proven. And so we believe there's going to be a difficulty there with the bribery.
Thank you, counsel. General Purcell?
I'm somewhat confused about exactly what their position is on this, but it seems they're saying you cannot remove someone even if you know they accepted a bribe unless you can somehow move through the criminal process before the electors meet. And that's just absurd.
It's a great argument to eliminate elector discretion. However, when asked point blank, can you find a case where an elector has been bribed, the state could find none. And so as a hypothetical, it was very flashy, it was very sensational, but as something real, it didn't really hold water.
It was rather interesting to hear the questions that the judges asked. They dealt a lot with the hypotheticals, whereas I wish that they dealt with the reality of the case.
On the subject of reality, some of the questions, including those from Justice Clarence Thomas, seemed a little out of this world.
Counsel, the elector who had promised to vote for the winning candidate could suddenly say, I'm going to vote for Frodo Baggins, and I really like Frodo Baggins. And you're saying under your system, you can't do anything about that.
Your Honor, I think there is something to be done because that would be the vote for a non-person. No matter how big a fan many people are of Frodo Baggins.
So when Frodo Baggins entered the Supreme Court, of course, you knew that that was going to trend on Twitter, as opposed to faithless electors. And to hear it come from Clarence Thomas was truly special.
What stood out the most is the opposition argued mostly about the chaos it might cause, and not on any actual constitutional or legal standing.
Those who disagree with your argument say that it would lead to chaos, where the popular vote is close, and changing just a few votes would alter the outcome, and there would be a long period of uncertainty about who the next president was going to be. Do you deny that that is a good possibility if your argument prevails?
We deny it's a good possibility. We don't deny it's a possibility, and we believe there are risks on either side.
We can't make decisions based on whether it's going to cause chaos or not, or else we'd be flipping parts of the Constitution right and left.
Electors have discretion on who they can vote for. This does not equal more chaos. There were great questions, but Justice Kavanaugh, I think, asked one of the most important questions.
Good morning. What is the purpose of having electors?
And there was a bit of silence with that. If we are going to bind electors where all they are automatons just casting a ballot, then what is their purpose? If it's merely ceremonial, is that something we really want to have in the American electoral process?
Brett Ciafalo and Michael Baca have been fighting for answers for 4 years, a fight they want to win, but that's not their ultimate goal.
I hope we win, but I've always said through this entire process from day one, I am against the Electoral College. It should not exist. It should be gone as soon as possible. I'm simply trying to represent my duties under the Constitution as best I can. And it's the Electoral College that takes away the individual's vote, not the individual electors.
It wasn't my ambition to be an elector. This wasn't about me. This wasn't about my politics. This wasn't about my ideology. I'm just a guy who was trying to do what was best for the country.